A day of decision approaches as Alec Murdaugh appeals his 2 homicide convictions. Nancy Mace, crazy or crazy like a fox? At the South Carolina State House, a big week with a clarion call sounded for reform of our broken justice system, and South Carolina Republicans caught attempting to rig their own primary. And last but not least, another person placed in a position of public trust in the Palmetto State caught abusing it in the worst way possible. I'm Will Folks, the owner and founding editor of FITSNews.com. Welcome to another edition of your Week in Review. All right, so we're here in the FITSNews studio, which as of this moment has not frozen due to Wintermageddon or Icegeddon or whatever the hell we're calling this storm, this massive, unprecedented deluge of wintry precipitation, Jen. It's impacting 36 states. 200 million Americans currently under some sort of winter storm watch. That's crazy.
It's wild.
And Southerners are clearly totally unprepared, as always.
As always.
So we're going to be turning into...
I have seen salt trucks out, which is fascinating because Louisiana, we didn't have salt trucks.
Well, let's hope our DOT is better at brining roads than they are repairing them. I'm not optimistic.
Yeah, state of emergency declared.
I know, it's nuts.
Yeah.
By the way, if you haven't been following Wintermageddon, FITSNews.com has you covered for the very latest updates on that storm system. We've been tracking it very closely. So go to FITSNews.com for the latest on Wintermageddon. But Jen, against the backdrop of this ominous winter storm, we have been just under siege from a deluge of stories, too. It's just been a crazy start to 2026. And certainly the biggest case we've ever covered is now back for a very pivotal moment, the Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga. FITSNews, first to break that story, drove that narrative for years. We've been driving the narrative since the big trial of Alec Murdaugh back in 2023, zeroing in on some issues with those verdicts and some questions about the integrity of those guilty verdicts against Alec Murdaugh. But a big moment in that process is set to unfold next month in Columbia, South Carolina at the state Supreme Court. Jen, tell us what's happening.
So we are gearing up for oral arguments on February 11th in front of the South Carolina Supreme Court.
For his appeal.
Correct, for his appeal. So that is, it's going to be a very big hearing. We just got the order from the Supreme Court regarding media. There will be 100 seats in that courtroom. It is first come, first serve.
You going to camp out with me ahead of that?
Yeah, I'm not missing that. Are you kidding me?
Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be first
I've
come,
got a tent.
first serve. SCTV is going to be broadcasting it, so people will be able to watch it live. We'll also put it live on our YouTube channel. But yeah, it should be a very interesting hearing. So
February 11 at what time?
It's 9:30 a.m.
Okay.
And they also...
Go ahead and write that on your calendars,
yeah,
folks.
you don't want to miss it. They also have released the guidelines. I think those just came out yesterday or today for the attorneys. They each have 30 minutes to present their case to the justices, and then 10 minutes for, I can't remember, I think it's rebuttal. I can't remember. That may not be the right word, but 10 minutes to rebut arguments. So it'll be interesting.
And then they take questions. The
Yes.
justices can ask them questions.
Yeah, I spoke with Dick Harpootlian this week. I have an article that will be coming out in the next couple of days, and they are, they seem very ready. He is going back through the state's filings, and I mean they seem very ready. They're
confident. Yeah.
Cautiously optimistic, I believe is the word that he used. But
Well,
yeah,
they had a boost to their record. The filings you had written on this a few months ago, Jen, the record in this case before the court, the written record consisting of the appeal, the state's response to that appeal, and then the defense's final response to that. Those documents were finalized, sent to the court back in November, I think it was.
Yes. Now this case is moving very fast. I mean, it's not unprecedented, but given the fact that there were 9,000 pages in that record, and they scheduled oral arguments for February, they are fast tracking this case.
But the record was supplemented this week in a
Correct.
very interesting way. Walk us through what happened this week.
Correct. So, Alex Murdaugh's legal team filed a motion to supplement the record with former Colleton County Clerk of Court Becky Hill's guilty pleas. So she pled guilty to, I believe, 4 charges in general sessions court. Obstruction of justice,
Misconduct,
misconduct in office,
perjury.
perjury, and they filed a motion with the Supreme Court to supplement the record with those guilty pleas. What was interesting about that motion is typically when you file a motion, the state should have had 10 days to respond to that motion. But the Supreme Court ruled that they would allow that supplement to come in without getting the state's response.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if that
Well,
means
the state
anything.
took, in fairness to the Supreme Court, the state took a long time to respond to Murdaugh's appeal. They could remember they kept every month there was another
Yeah,
delay. They would, it became like the dog ate my homework type
it
situation.
did. It did take a long time, but, in covering filings within the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, there are often, um, motions to extend time frame for response. So, but yeah, I mean, it took a long time, but yeah, that is now supplemented in the record and will be considered. And when both sides go in to present their case to the Supreme Court, they have 30 minutes, but they may get 3 minutes of their argument out, and the justices may start peppering them with
Yeah,
questions. So they don't really know how it's going to play out, and they've got to be prepared for you know, any way it's going to go.
sure. And we're told for the state that Creighton Waters will be arguing the state's
Correct.
response to the appeal.
Hmm.
We don't know exactly, as Harpootlian and Jim Griffin will likely.
That is what, Dick indicated to me, that they will both be presenting.
Okay. So we got the stage set. The arguments are essentially now before the court. These verdicts were tampered with. These
Mhm,
verdicts, we believe, in fact, may have been worse than that. There have been allegations that this jury was, in fact, rigged.
mhm.
That is not part of the record, though.
No.
The allegations by Myra Crosby, the juror who was kicked off the panel literally hours before these verdicts were handed down, a potentially decisive removal based on some very questionable activity in
Correct.
the background, activity which incidentally was investigated by the same people who have a stake in preserving these verdicts, the State Law Enforcement Division. I've never understood how SLED investigated this, their own case. I mean, again, no disrespect to anybody, but that to me seemed like a conflict of interest. But at any rate, Jen, the case here, we've talked a lot about the jury tampering. That's obviously central to Alec Murdaugh's appeal.
Mhm,
But aren't we at a point now where we're looking at how the justices are going to interpret different cases as it relates to jury tampering? They're gonna look at state cases, they're gonna look at federal cases.
mhm.
Where do you see this decision where do you see it really falling? What cases do you think they're really gonna zero in on?
So the 2 cases that that the justices are likely to look at are State versus Green, which is a South Carolina state in which, a bailiff made a remark to the jurors, and they ended up overturning the verdict.
And is that the case Gene Toll relied upon in denying Murdaugh a new
Yes,
trial?
yes, that is the one and the same. And then the federal standard is Remmer, which is, I mean, that has been relied on for years. But in looking at the State versus Green, that decision was written by, at the time, appeals judge Hill, D. Garrison Hill. Um, and
He's
it
now on the Supreme Court.
he is now one
He's
of the
one of the votes.
justices who's going to be ruling on this. So that was written by Hill, and it was determined that the remark made by the bailiff was innocuous. It wasn't something that could have changed the verdict. And there's an interesting footnote in that ruling that indicates, let me make sure I get this right, that because it was innocuous, they didn't have to ask the jurors if it affected their verdict. Um, but
In this case, they did ask them.
Right. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they interpret and apply these laws. In terms of when we're going to see an opinion, I did ask Dick Harpootlian that when I was sitting down with him, and he said, it can take years for them to come back for an opinion, but given the speed at which this case is moving, he would expect to see one in a 3-month time frame.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that decision because you and I have had some conversations kind of offline about this. And based on everything that you've seen and that you've tracked, you believe that, like, if you were a justice, you would vote to give the guy a new trial based on everything you've seen. And so there's an expectation that that is what is going to happen based on the law, based on some of the evidence that's now been admitted, perhaps the tea leaves of them letting this Becky Hill thing come in.
Right.
But there are political considerations
Yes.
at play here.
Which is crazy. There shouldn't be.
But let's go ahead and let's go ahead and make a prediction. Do you think that the South Carolina Supreme Court, based on everything you've seen up to this point, is going to give him a new trial?
I do. I do. I think they're
Really?
going to give it to him based on the jury tampering. Um, Now, I could be very wrong about that, but I do think that that is what if they're going to rely on something to give him a new trial, I think it's going to be the jury tampering.
Hmm.
I do think they'll address some of those other issues, and maybe add some clarification for future cases,
Hmm.
on the evidentiary issues, the financial crimes being admitted. But I do think the jury tampering is might be the linchpin.
Well, for the integrity of South Carolina's justice system, which is hanging on by a very thin thread,
It gets thinner every day.
I do hope you're right in your prediction because, as we've argued on several occasions in this studio in months past, years past at this point, if the Sixth Amendment doesn't apply to Alec Murdaugh, it doesn't apply to any of us. And so it's got to be a pure verdict. It's got to be a fair verdict. It's got to be one absent from any sort of tampering or potential rigging. But I want to throw this at you, and this is what concerns me. You've laid out your opinion based on the merits.
Yes.
Here's the problem I see. Lawyer legislators control the General Assembly. The General Assembly controls the judiciary.
Mhm.
The lawyer legislators in the trial lawyer lobby, they want this to go away because this is one of their former presidents. He was involved in all manner of corruption down there. The South Carolina justice system took a huge hit thanks to Alec Murdaugh. They want this to go away. They don't want to get into the broader scandals involving the judges, involving how this man was able to create this legal dynasty down there, how his family for years was able to basically run a fiefdom that they essentially controlled justice in a 5-county region of the Palmetto State for a century. They don't want to talk about that, Jen. And so I think the order is going to come down from on high. Here's the wild card, though. What a lot of people need to be aware of, and if you're going to watch those deliberations, keep an eye on this. One of the justices hearing this case, John Few, has been targeted by the lawmakers. This guy had the audacity, Jen, to interpret the law on the issue of abortion and tell lawmakers to go back to the drawing board on a bill they crafted that was just not constitutional based on the way it was written. Now, they rewrote it, they resubmitted it. Supreme Court checked the box and said, yes, this one will pass. But they're pissed at him for calling them out. And they're going to try to replace him and probably will replace him with, guess who? One of their own, a former lawyer legislator leader. So if that's not sending a message to these guys, Jen, I don't know what is. So I'm concerned that it's going to be that dynamic, which
So let's say it is that dynamic,
what happens
which
then?
would be a damn shame. Would be just it would validate everything we've been saying about this.
South Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to end up in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals at the federal level. They're going to file a writ of habeas corpus, and
If they lose with the state
right,
Supreme Court. Yeah.
and if that happens, it will get overturned at the federal level.
Yeah. Well, folks, no one has been following this any closer than Jen Wood. As this saga moves forward, as we approach February 11, be on the lookout, first of all, for her story following that interview with Dick Harpootlian. We're also going to talk again with the Attorney General. He was in this studio just this past week. We asked him briefly about this. We're going to continue to press them for some answers. But This is where you want to come to find the very latest news on that Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga. And I also want to point out that in addition to tracking this appeal closer than any other media outlet, Jen Wood, our research director, has been digging into some of the bigger stories behind the Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga. I'm talking about the judicial corruption. I'm talking about the drug allegations that have gone completely or almost completely unexplored by prosecutors. We're going to continue to dig into those elements of the story. But Jen, I want to switch gears with you now. We had South Carolina's justice system had another big shock this week of a different variety, political influence that was a bit, what's the word, more unhinged in its.
I think unhinged is a word I've heard a few people use to refer to the situation.
But with Nancy Mace and her latest filing before South Carolina Circuit Court Judge, is it Donald Hocker?
That's correct.
A retired circuit court judge who was assigned by the Supreme Court to handle all of these civil cases involving Nancy Mace following her big scorched earth speech where she accused multiple individuals of being sexual predators and accused the attorney general of the state of covering it up. Just a shocking speech last February on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. But Jen, she has told this judge who imposed a gag order on all the parties to these lawsuits, she's told him she's not going to follow his ruling.
Yeah.
She's told him she's going to represent herself.
Uh,
She said he's running a kangaroo court. What in the hell is going on?
Holy cow. Yes. So this lawsuit was filed in May 2025, after her scorcher speech, by Jane Doe, who's now been identified formally by the court, Alexis Berg, accusing Nancy Mace's former fiance, Patrick Bryant, and two other businessmen in the Low Country of sexual assault. And this lawsuit started out very, very,
Contentious.
yeah, and contentious. And in the last 3 months, it has just spiraled out of control. So in November, Supreme Court appointed Circuit Court Judge Hocker to preside over all of this litigation.
They dumped this mess in his lap.
Yes.
And it's a bunch of cases.
It is.
And
And
it's some criminal cases against one of the people that Mace accused of this assault.
yes.
So
yes.
some of these guys that she's accused have, in fact, been criminally charged, and there is an ongoing SLED investigation.
Right.
But Hocker got this whole mess. And
He got this mess. Shortly after he got the case, he issued a gag order to keep people from talking about this in the media, which is interesting because, Nancy Mace has built her platform for governor on this, on taking down sexual predators. I was very curious how long she would be able to
stay quiet.
And she was, not quiet, but over the holidays, it wasn't. She is an avid social media user, and she does not filter herself. But she was quieter. But as soon as we got back from Christmas break, there was a motion filed by Bryant's team, asking the court for sanctions against her because she was violating gag order. And it had a list of, evidence and
It was a pretty
exhibits attached.
compelling.
It was very compelling.
Yeah.
And,
She was violating the order.
Yeah, it was pretty clear. And then in addition to that, they filed a motion for sanctions against her attorney for filing a motion in December that was based on um, case law that was fabricated, that was misapplied.
It was an AI hallucination, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. And so they filed this motion, and the judge ruled on it, and then they filed an amended motion without telling the court why they filed the amended motion. Did not tell the judge that, hey, we screwed up. We put this is why we're filing this. They just tried to slip it in there. So they filed a motion for sanctions. And it just the sanction war is going back and forth, back and forth. This week, it got very contentious. Patrick Bryant, her former fiance, filed an affidavit with exhibits including text messages from Nancy to another individual, where she said that she wanted Judge Hocker removed. She was going to demand Judge Rode, the previous judge, be put back on this case because he was ruling in favor of the victims, and she will not be silenced. And this was all in the exhibits to Bryant's affidavit. One day later,
All hell broke loose.
all hell broke loose. So Nancy Mace filed a motion herself, indicating she had parted with her counsel and she would be representing herself. So that's pro se is what the legal term is for that. Until she finds new counsel, hopefully within 30 days. That's not where it really went off the rails. She then filed a letter to Judge Hocker, a 5-page letter. I've never seen anything quite like it. Have you?
I have not, and I got to be honest. The lawyers, the judges, uh, folks who have been texting, emailing, calling me in response to this letter, they've never seen anything like it either. This is unprecedented.
It was so
Give us the highlights. Walk us through this.
I actually did go through and highlighted it.
Walk us through this letter from Mace.
It indicates she has dismissed her attorney. She'll be representing herself pro se. That she is seeking to move the entire action to district court as the entity of this action is intertwined with the legislative actions I undertook in my official capacity as a member of U.S. Congress. So she wants it moved to federal court.
In other words, she wants the government to represent her.
Yes.
She wants the taxpayers to fund her defense. Okay.
Yep.
It's becoming a little clearer. Okay.
Yeah. So she says the gag order is overly broad, unconstitutional, unenforceable, particularly as it applies to a sitting member of U.S. Congress and the leading candidate for the governor of South Carolina.
Ooh. We'll be talking with Dylan Nolan in a moment about that.
Yeah. You're going to have to get into those polls and... Anyway.
And she accused him of running a kangaroo court at one point.
Accused him of running a kangaroo court, and she respectfully informed the honorable court, I will not be silenced.
Oh, boy. So we're no longer unhinged at this point. The door's off.
There
are no hinges.
I'm not going to obey your court order, and I want this moved to federal court.
So we've talked with a number of different attorneys who have weighed in on how dangerous a path this is. And I'll go back. There was a moment in 2017 where I was ordered by a circuit court judge to reveal some sources.
Mm-hmm.
Declined to do that. Fortunately, we were heard in front of another court.
Were you represented by legal counsel?
I was represented by legal counsel at that time.
Check.
I was not repping myself. I had Pete Strom, Mandy Powers-Norrell, a really good team in my corner during that ordeal. But we were fortunate enough to get in front of a circuit court judge that, again, they put me on the stand, and I had to formalize that and say, yes, I'm not going to follow this order. But it was a very respectful, it wasn't kind of in your face. I didn't particularly like the first judge, but I didn't insult him or anything. I just said, with respect, Your Honor, I can't reveal these sources because they hadn't given me permission.
Right.
I mean, but the good news about that case was it established, on the record, a reporter's right to do that. So that's now part of the record in South Carolina, and it wasn't before. So that's a big deal. But in this case, I think we're heading into some precedent that could be very damaging for Mace. And I don't see the end game here, Jen. I'm trying to figure out.
For a while, I was, kind of thinking, is this calculated on her? Like, is all of this calculated on her part? Is this press? Is this, a media move? Is this trying to sway people in her favor? But, it's getting to the point where it's starting to not make sense, and it's a little concerning. I don't know. And it's bizarre. And, first thing this morning, I'm getting notifications that she's filed more motions.
Stuff. It's unreal.
And that legally, they don't make sense.
Yeah. Well, let's get Dylan Nolan in here. We're going to talk now about the politics of this. But Jen, amazing work on these two stories. You will keep us in the loop
I
on
will.
the kangaroo court,
The
the alleged
kangaroo
kangaroo court.
apparently, the kangaroo court there's a status conference today, so I'm just,
Oh wow.
curious to see where this goes.
Well, FITSNews was the first to report on these bizarre filings from Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Now let's get Dylan Nolan in here to talk politics and the implications of this on the Palmetto State governor's race. So, as we transition from the legal side of the Nancy Mace drama into the political fallout, I did want to read one of the many responses I've received from members of the South Carolina bar, in this case, a very prominent member of the bar, that I think makes this transition pretty clear. Regarding Nancy Mace, that letter is one of the most unhinged filings I've ever seen. Evidences a complete misunderstanding of discovery, jurisdiction, etc. Judge Hocker is one of the good ones, enjoys a sterling reputation among the bench and the bar for his temperament and fairness. Pro se representation, or people representing themselves, generally doesn't go well for folks. It really won't go well for her if this is her tact. Train wreck ahead. It will even be worse after she loses the GOP primary and becomes a true lame duck. Massive spin out predicted. Dylan, earlier this month, I wrote a column on FITSNews.com entitled Nancy Mace, Can She Read the Room? And at the time that column was published, the gag order very much in effect, Nancy Mace not fully abiding by it, but not really freaking out over it. And as you noted, attending one of her press conferences and watching her at several other events seemed to be honing her message, seemed to be focusing on some issues that resonated with primary voters. What the hell happened?
Your source here, a member of the bar, I don't think that's really at all who she's gunning for. I don't think she really cares what the judge thinks of her. I don't think she cares what members of the South Carolina bar think of her. I think that she is gunning for that group of people who think that the judiciary in this state is corrupt, that think that the lawyers in this state aren't worth listening to. I think she's trying to cut herself that outside line. Now, we're talking about a live judicial process where she certainly could face contempt of court charges, where she could lose the case because the judge will make a series of rulings that put her at a disadvantageous position because she's chosen to take this tact. But I don't think that she's doing it so that she gets a glowing review from, anonymous attorneys in the state. I think she's directly addressing the primary electorate through these filings because she's not allowed to do so because of this gag order.
Well, let's talk about her addressing the primary electorate because, as you and I noted, one of the things that had led to her frontrunner status was her ability to tap into a lot of these issues that are important to those voters. But since last February, since her scorched earth speech and the very personal fallout from it, a lot of Republican primary voters have indicated that that is not something that they want to see out of their gubernatorial nominee. And in fact, Mace is the one gubernatorial candidate on the Republican side with the highest negatives. In fact, even her own polling has showed her underwater in terms of unfavorable ratings with Republican voters over her favorability. So let me ask you this. If it's not working, why is she going back to it?
That I don't know. I mean, we know that people who are in Nancy's orbit, who are competent strategists, one of whom we had in our studio this week, tend to not stay there for long. So I don't know. Is she doing this? I would guess that it's her hands which are on the wheel, which in political operations, frequently people will employ strategists to advise them in situations like this so that they don't make missteps. However, everyone that we talk to indicates that Nancy has a very personal style where she is really the captain of the ship, for better or for worse. And the way we've seen these situations play out all throughout 2025, I don't see any reason for this type of drama to play any better for her in 2026. But it seems to be the choice she's making.
Well, we had one of those strategists in here on our Fitz Politics show, which airs every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. live here on FITSNews.com. One of those strategists, Wes Donahue, was in here. He worked for Nancy for an extended period of time. In fact, when he was working for Nancy, she was emerging as the front runner in this race. We got a clip lined up from Wes, so he didn't seem too eager to talk about this, did he?
Wes claimed that he's transcended it all. He, of course, developed a reputation as South Carolina's political knife fighter, one of the most get it done guys that you could hire in this state. And, he
Still
built
is.
he built his firm across the whole country doing, the best digital political consulting that really anybody was doing, top one or two firms in the country. But he had parted ways with Mace, and this is something that all throughout 2025, his Twitter page, for anybody involved in South Carolina politics, I'm sure they knew he was just dropping bombs on Nancy Mace day after day, week after week, month after month. And finally, as Wes is like to do, he disappeared off of X, which is, greatly upset some people within our office.
Yeah, Jen was a huge fan.
Yes. But we asked him, we said, well, I asked him, I said, you claim to have, transcended all this political knife fighting. What about your last year with Nancy Mace? And he had quite an answer.
Well, I mean, honestly, man, I was just ghetto. Like everything for us was always fun. We fought all the time, bro. Like in high school, we were just getting the shit kicked out of us, or we were kicking the shit out of somebody else. It was constant just fighting. I mean, I just grew up in a rough and tumble world. So I get up here and you don't know any better, right? You're still immature and you're out here drinking and shit. And you still got that ghetto in you. I know a lot of people here in South Carolina might have that redneck in them. But for me, it was just having that ghetto in me. And it took a while to get that out. I was just fighting.
Have you completely excised it?
No, like you're always, I'll always be the poor kid from Section 8. But
you reminded Nancy Mace of that in the last year.
Yeah, can we let's put that on. I'm sick of talking about her.
I know you're sick of Twitter as well.
I deleted my Twitter account. Yeah, I deleted it because what's funny is I was having this conversation with Ron Reddy about this, and he was like, Wesley, it's not about your tweets, it's about you have a lot of negativity in your heart. Like, it's absorbing that information from Twitter that you're seeing and the way you want to react to it. Like, that's no way to live. Like, you don't want to always be mad at someone and have that negativity. And I really took it to heart, and I went home and like told Elizabeth, I was like, God, man, Ron really hit me philosophically today. Like, he's right. Like, I get so pissed off when I see these things she's doing, and I want to speak up about it because it enrages me so much to see my congresswoman acting the way she's acting, that then I want to respond. And the best way to show restraint and to not have that negativity in your heart is to just not see it at all. So I deleted my Twitter account simply so I don't see that kind of bullshit.
But you realize her opponents are really upset about that because you were
I was doing the job for him.
You were driving her nuts, man.
I know, and it's easy to drive her nuts, but that wasn't the point. I was just embarrassed that I helped someone like that get elected, that I taught her some of this internet stuff, and that she's my congresswoman, and it's just not a way that I believe someone who is representing citizens is supposed to act. Like, you're supposed to be the voice of the people. And that's my ultimate problem with not just Nancy, but with all these politicians right now. They just seem to forget that they're there at the consent of the governed.
But it's relatively recent, though, the discord with her, the disconnect. When did it go bad with you and Nancy?
Look, man, just go read the deposition. I'm not going to get into it. Like, I mean, you published a deposition before I even saw a copy of the deposition. The first time I saw my deposition was on FITSNews. So, like, look, I'm not going to get into it. Like, Nancy's going to be Nancy. I wish her luck. I hope she gets the help she needs. I just don't want. I'm just sick of talking about her.
Fair enough. She is one of the front runners for the gubernatorial nomination.
Yeah, but she's not going to be governor.
Okay.
I mean, she can't even govern herself. You think she's going to govern the state?
Who is?
Look, I mean, it's Alan can win, Pam can win, Ralph can win. I mean, look, I can't project this at the moment. There's still way too much time to go, but I mean, it's pretty clear it's going to be one of those three to me.
Well, and here's the question that I think everyone's asking is something really wrong with her? Because it seems like this tack that she's taken clearly not resonating with voters. I think by any objective poll, she's dropped from her front runner status. Even after the scorched earth, the initial returns on it by August, even though they were mixed, she was still leading in the polls in August of last year when she formally jumped in the race. But now I think she's third, fourth in most polls other than her own, obviously, which she claims she's leading the race. Do you still see a path for victory for Nancy Mace, particularly if this legal drama continues?
Absolutely. I mean, we're in an environment, and Wes talked about this, where people are sick and tired of the establishment, and our front runners as it stands, numbers 1 and 2. I mean, they each pay their own pollsters to write their polls saying that they're ahead, but it's Pamela Evitt, the lieutenant governor of the state, and Alan Wilson, the attorney general of the state, both people who are highly connected with the state's political establishment, that are the same people that we outline massive problems with on this show on a weekly basis. So if she can establish herself in the minds of voters as somebody who is going to take that system on, and I think that she'll have competition in doing that from Ralph Norman, perhaps from Ron Reddy if he elects to get into the race. But I think that that outside line, even with these negatives, is still a very viable path to the governor's mansion.
Well, certainly no one will lose challenging the lack of integrity in the justice system, but here's the pivot that I think she's got to worry about. We've talked about this, and Wes has talked about this a lot. Republican primary voters don't want a victim.
No.
They want a fighter. And I think there's a fine line between, I mean, you can certainly take that victimhood aura and translate it into being a fighter, which I think she's trying to do. I mean, honestly, I think she's trying to be Donald Trump in heels, and I don't think it's working for her. But how do you think, how would you advise her to walk that line between perpetual victimhood and then being an aggressive advocate to fix a broken system?
I think she's smart in that this is not personal anymore. It is now her versus the court. It is not her versus a person that she voluntarily brought into her life. It is her versus the institution. The way that she's positioned herself here, if she is going to make this legal battle of hers something that is, not just filings between lawyers that happen and get articles on page 3, the Post and Courier, if this is going to be a front page issue for her, taking it and making her versus the institution, putting herself in a position where she says, Judge, you want to shut me up, then you're going to have to lock me up. That's a lot stronger of a position for her to take than, oh, this guy that I voluntarily cohabitated with did things to me that are not good.
Do you think, though, it would be a strong position if she were a candidate with a cleaner slate? I mean, we are talking about someone who has built-in negatives, almost 50%. Multiple polls showing her nearly 50% negatives amongst the Republican Party electorate. So I guess my point is, I see what you're saying, but can that work for her given the pre-existing perception that she's simply off the reservation, off her meds?
I don't know. I mean, only time will tell. But the other thing is that who knows what the real designs are here? Is this 100% I'm putting all my marbles on being the next governor? I mean, I don't think Nancy's unintelligent enough to not have some other plans going at the same time. Is it a Fox News hosting gig that it could be next? Is it a run for U.S. Senate? Who knows what her aspirations are, but she could be positioning herself for a future role that is not governor of South Carolina while running this race.
It is the age-old question, crazy or crazy like a fox? I guess we're going to find out. Dylan, this governor's race unfolding against a backdrop here in South Carolina politics, a very pivotal year for the Palmetto State. The ideological direction of the Republican Party very much hanging in the balance, not only in the governor's race, but in the attorney general's race and in 124 races for seats in the South Carolina House of Representatives. Now, we've been covering a lot of these elections for months already. In the governor's case, we've really been covering it for over a year now. But there were some major developments this week as it relates to candidate eligibility in these races. In fact, there is a push by the South Carolina Republican Party, one Republican leader in particular, to kick a bunch of Republicans off the ballot. And we've got some footage of this. I wanted to clip to this. This is Brandon Newton, a state representative who has sponsored a bill that would kick South Carolina First Circuit Solicitor David Pascoe off of the ballot for Attorney General, that would kick retired Colonel Alex Pelbath, the guy who flew the last flight out of Afghanistan, one of the most decorated Air Force officers in American history, would kick him off the ballot. Numerous other candidates. And then here's this guy complaining about being criticized for introducing that bill. Let's listen to this whiny beta male for a minute. Let's cue this, Dylan.
I actually had someone apparently show up to my university where I teach at yesterday and go around campus and put stuff on cars and stuff like that. So my personal Facebook page is still filled with a lot of people who serve on the EC, who have served on the EC, who've been party chairs. And I can say unequivocally that this has been the nastiest debate internally that I've ever witnessed within the party structure. The divide on this topic and the divide between these two pieces of legislation have truly put, I believe, the party into a civil war. And if you're sitting there and you've seen social media, it's been pretty rough. And I've seen members of the executive committee on different sides of this calling each other names, accusing each other of trying to do things. And to me, that is over the line. And then nextly to that, here we are today being asked to step into this debate while also confronting the fact that our governor has said just last week he's vetoing both of these bills and was clear about it. He didn't equivocate. He didn't say it, maybe. He was pretty clear. We're also sitting here with a Senate that has never once even considered the topic, has shown zero interest of taking it up. And as the assistant leader and also as someone who wants to be a realist in the legislative process and as the lead sponsor of this bill, I don't think today is the day to do that. I believe that if the party is this divided, it needs to be on the same page. This body and our members should not be placed in the part of trying to create a kumbaya moment between two warring factions within the party. To me, the party needs to unite around one idea, one concept, and agree on it. But asking us to pick between them, I don't think is fair.
All right, so Dylan, you spoke with Alex Pelbath about this. He was at that hearing where this guy's whining about, consequences of his actions. But you spoke with Colonel Pelbath at that hearing. Set this up for us.
Yeah, so I spoke with Colonel Pelbath as everybody was queuing in the hallway waiting to get into this hearing. And I've been around these clowns for about 5 years at this point, so I could see the writing on the wall of exactly what was going to happen, which was that they scheduled this thing last. And of course, they didn't have time to let him speak. Now, here's my...
that works.
Yeah, and I knew this was going to happen, so I said, Colonel, let me grab you on camera before so you at least have a way to get what you would like to say to this body and to the public out when they inevitably don't have time to speak with you. So here's my conversation with Colonel Pelbath.
House Bill 3643, while it addresses closing primaries, it has an attachment to it that has nothing to do with closing the primaries, and in my opinion is an unconstitutional power grab by the elite. So what it says is, if you haven't voted in 2 of the last 3 primary elections, you are ineligible to be a candidate to run for office. So they're trying to control the candidacy, which obviously I have a problem with. So I just retired from the military 2 years ago. I don't meet that requirement of having voted in 2 of the last 3 primaries. So it would automatically exclude me from being a candidate. So first and foremost, that's not about closing the primaries. That's about controlling candidates, which I have a real problem with. And I also don't like the fact that one of my opponents is a signer of the bill. His name is on that bill. That would exclude me. So I think Mark Smith needs to remove his name from the bill and either support the other one or all of them need to work together to push forward a clean, closed primary bill and do what the voters want and nothing the voters don't want.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for being all across the world for, while some of us were here in Columbia voting in primaries. I don't think that should exclude you.
No, I know most people don't. I've received a lot of phone calls from what I would call the political insiders here assuring me that they're going to grant me a waiver, that they're going to let me run. But I even have a problem with that. The fact that somebody has to let me run. I didn't serve my country for 22 years, so a group of political insiders could let me run for office. So the whole freedom thing, I think it's an un-American, unconstitutional clause in the bill, and I'm just here to speak out against and make sure that they strip that from the bill completely.
And we should point out that this bill is scheduled to be discussed 4th out of 4. There's a good chance that we don't even get an opportunity for you to make this case.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes down there. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. I'm hopeful. I think I know the legislators know that people want to discuss this, so I'm hopeful that they're going to give us the time.
This has certainly become an explosive issue. I hope that you get to make your case on the other side of this wall. But I thank you for talking to me so that you can make your case to our audience, and they don't give me that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Dylan, a great move getting that response on camera, and certainly David Pasco has been just as vocal, just as aggressive in challenging this. In fact, he penned an op-ed on FITSNews.com detailing why he believes that Republicans are trying to throw him off the ballot. Basically, his argument is that if he's elected Attorney General, a lot of them might be on the business end of some anti-corruption investigation and prosecution. So very interesting tack that David Pasco's taken. Now, the status of these bills, Dylan, it was decided at this committee hearing that they are not going to advance either one of these at the moment. They're going to try to work on a compromise bill. But the key here, Governor Henry McMaster, this guy's basically been, sitting with his thumb up his butt for the last 10 years. But now, in his last year in office, he's decided to issue a bunch of veto threats on a number of different issues. One of them is closed primaries. Governor McMaster does not support them. He's made it clear he will veto either of these closed primary bills, which obviously takes a lot of the air out of these bills. But this has exposed a real rift within the Republican Party, Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, it's exposed their intention, if they could get away with it, to knife completely viable candidates that were, we talk about Pasco. Obviously, Pasco literally might imprison a number of these people who are running corrupt schemes where they're enriching themselves and their friends. But you look at a guy like Pelbath, I don't think he's going to be putting any of them in prison. But at the same time, multiple of his opponents in that race are connected to this bill, whether that be Mark Smith, who's in the South Carolina House right now, who is a sponsor of the bill which would prevent Pelbath from running against him.
Who they did let speak. They let him speak in favor of them.
Of course, yeah. Mark got to speak his word about that.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
Or you want to talk about the Honeycutt angle?
Yes, and also one of Pelbath's opponents in the 1st District is Jenny Costa Honeycutt, who is the daughter of Cindy Costa, a member of the Republican Executive Committee that would ultimately decide whether candidates like Pelbath get on the ballot. So there's a lot of intrigue here.
That's not nearly as direct to me as Mark Smith, but still troubling.
Well, it's somebody who can put their thumb on the scale.
Right.
Bottom line, and that is troubling, particularly making it applicable to these primaries. And the other thing that's interesting is this bill, if they passed it, which again, I don't think with the veto threat is going to happen, but if they passed it, it would take effect right in the middle of the filing period. So it's almost like these candidates would have legally filed under the law as it existed at that time. And all of a sudden, during the filing period, a new law takes effect. Who the hell knows what the legality would be?
And, I will say these jokers in Columbia are great at reviving, zombie bills that are awful and bringing them back. But it does seem like this, after this week, is reaching a point where it's not viable, between McMaster saying that he would veto it and the massive public opposition to this, situation which we're speaking about right now. However, I think this is an issue that's widely supported by the GOP electorate. Maybe we should, if you're a member of the South Carolina GOP, look at the way that the party hacks are attempting to use this to control who is and isn't on a ballot, and think long and hard about whether you want to give more power to these people to select who is even allowed to run in these races.
That's a very good point. I want to ask you though now, let's pivot, Dylan. Let's talk about reviving a bill that could actually do some good in South Carolina. I'm talking about Senate Bill 244. This bill was all the rage during the previous session. It was a comprehensive lawsuit abuse reform bill that was introduced by Senate Leader Shane Massey. Massey very aggressively touted this bill at the subcommittee and committee levels, believing he had the votes to get it through the state Senate.
He did not aggressively count his votes.
Yes, he did not.
We had a better whip count than he did throughout that process.
Indeed, we did, because while Massey was beating the drum for this bill, the trial lawyers in South Carolina were busy funneling all kinds of cash to lawmakers who would ultimately stab Massey in the back and flip-flop on this issue. One of those state senators actually took the floor of the chamber and outlined how he was effectively bribed by the trial lawyer lobby to oppose Massey's bill. Now, this week at the State House, a huge presence, the South Carolina Truckers Association, descended upon the State House, horns blaring, tons of truckers in the building, pushing to bring back some of this aggressive tort reform legislation. We actually spoke with the president and CEO of that organization, Rick Todd, one of the most respected veteran lobbyists over at the South Carolina State House. Here's an interview with me and Rick on the steps of the State House.
Senate Leader Massey proposed a very aggressive, comprehensive tort bill last session. During the subcommittee and committee process, he was very aggressive in pushing that bill, and in fact, very confident in that bill's prospects for passage. When the bill went on the floor, however, we saw some conservative Republican senators who were believed to be supportive of reforming this broken system flip-flop and side with the trial lawyer lobby. And then there was a very shocking moment on the floor of the state Senate where a member of that chamber, Senator Tom Fernandez, a lawyer, stood up and basically acknowledged having been effectively bribed by this industry with $50,000 of campaign contributions.
Now, here's the quiet part out loud. Did you know that the trial lawyer lobby has offered me campaign fundraisers in the amount of $50,000 to $100,000 per campaign if I voted against this. Did you know that?
I was not aware of that, Senator.
And did you know that
Senate will suspend? President, I move that we go in. I would just caution this. Let's caution the body. Stand at ease momentarily.
But did that shock you when that happened?
No, because I've been doing this so long. I know how the other side works. I know the resources they've got. I know how they bundle contributions.
But were you shocked that someone said it out loud?
I was. That's probably the most shocking but entertaining, uplifting moment of honesty. You know, everybody knows what goes on, but he said what nobody's willing to say. And of course, the place shut down right after that.
It did.
And, you know, I really can't comment on what else happened or what contributed to that. But I don't believe somebody would say something like that unless it actually, you know, did occur. So those are the forces, the unlimited resources that we're up against. And that side of the bar makes a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. And they don't want to change the game because they can basically recruit and screen and help elect the judges they want, and then they get to practice in front of them, and they make the rules with the law. So if I'm one of them, I wouldn't want to change it either. But I think the public, and I know the legislature in this coalition, and all the coalition's members, the people out there, are wise to what's going on, and hats off to you and others who are calling this out and just saying, look, let's shine a little sunshine on this and put some accountability in here. And we do need some reforms. So we have to be persistent. If there's anything I've learned, yeah, patience is great, but you run out at some point. But you have to persist because the other side's never going to quit.
Dylan, sometimes you really get a look at how things really happen in the state, how power is really wielded in South Carolina. I think we saw it there based on that, based on these realities of the massive amounts of money that the trial lawyers have at their disposal. Do we see any chance that real lawsuit reform advances?
It's tough to say at what rate it will advance, but you talk to these guys. I mean, I spoke to a number of these gentlemen who are operating trucking firms that were there at the State House. They say that their businesses will not be viable in 5 to 10 years if this continues, if their rates continue to increase. You know, regardless of whether or not they and their drivers are having accidents, their rates are going up like 12% a year. And these are companies that their margins are thin, you know, on a good year. So they just say that they won't exist anymore. And it's not just the trucking industry. This is happening in the food and bev industry. Effectively, it's allowing large firms in every industry to squeeze small firms to death. And it's doing that while enriching the insurance companies and while enriching the trial lawyer lobby. And it makes everything cost more for normal people and provides them little to no benefit. And, you know, folks who are opposed to reforming the system they'll just completely fight a straw man and say, well, what, you don't think that anybody should be able to go to court and get justice? That's absolutely not what any of these people that I spoke to are asking for. If they're in the wrong, they're completely fine with going to court and paying to make the situation right, paying for people's medical bills. If somebody passes away, paying their loved ones for the lost income. They're just asking for the legal system to not be tilted in such a way that if they are, you know, 1 or 2% responsible, end up paying 100% of the bill if the other people that are responsible don't have the cash, because that's the way it is right now.
Well, Dylan, it's not just the truckers we talked to at the State House. In fact, be on the lookout. FITSNews will be covering an update on the liquor liability component of this. We were told last year that lawmakers fixed that. They touted this big reform bill. Merle Smith in the House pushed it out with the trial lawyer's seal of approval. Guess what, folks? Not only is it not working, we're hearing things are worse than ever for the small bar and restaurant owners in the Palmetto State.
Where are these guys going to take their mistresses on dates if they get all the restaurants closed?
Hey, you're asking the wrong guy on that one, man. Dylan, great work at the State House this week covering this issue, man. You were everywhere. All the committee hearings on multiple bills, interviewing the key folks, getting that great interview with Colonel Pellbath. Folks, that's the kind of coverage FITSNews provides if you're looking to keep tabs not only on the issues at the State House, but how they filter out to the campaign. And again, most importantly, how they impact your daily life. Dylan Nolan's reporting, our reporting here at FITSNews is where you want to stay tuned. So it seems like every week on this show, we're talking about public corruption in South Carolina. And unfortunately, it seems like every week on this show, we're talking about law enforcement corruption in South Carolina. Also, saddest of all, it seems like every week on this show, we're talking about someone in a position of power doing horrific things to kids, the most vulnerable among us. We've seen it in the case of R.J. May, the disgraced state lawmaker. We've seen it in the case of Judge Gosnell down in Charleston, who is facing all manner of just heinous crimes at the federal level. But this week, we've got another story involving someone in a position of public trust who is staring down just some horrific charges of abusing kids. I'm joined now by Andy Fancher, our lead investigative reporter. You've been on this case out of Spartanburg, Andy, from the beginning. You were the only reporter who attended a bond hearing on this case, after which a judge posted a shockingly low bond, in my opinion, for a guy who frankly deserves to stay in a cell until his charges are adjudicated. But give us the breakdown on this case out of Spartanburg, Andy.
We are talking about former U.S. Marine Eric Blaine Powers, born and raised in the Spartanburg region, now an Anderson County man, who in November of 2025 was popped with 12 child sex crimes. You noted how we were there from the very beginning. We were actually on scene before that, because as I have followed and repeatedly covered the biblical unraveling of now former Spartanburg County Sheriff Chuck Wright, this was one of many, many, many cases that percolated to the top and landed on my desk. We had deployed several Freedom of Information Act requests related to both cases, because this is not a single offense. This is not a single allegation. We actually have two different criminal cases. One, he's actually on probation for. So Eric Blaine Powers was popped with 12 child sex crimes while he was on probation for a prior offense that unfortunately was pled down to a misdemeanor assault.
Those initial charges were very similar to some of the ones he's now currently facing, correct?
So I don't want us to get too lost in the weeds of the details of this case. I encourage folks, because these details are important, I encourage them to go check out our now 2 articles on this man. Almost, it could be argued, there is a bigger story here, which is the power players in the Powers vortex. But to get into what you just asked me about, yes, in 2018, he was charged for allegations lodged by a stepdaughter. The stepdaughter, who was a minor at the time, lived in the same home with the biological daughters of Eric Powers, one of whom has now lodged additional allegations that, like the previous case, took about 5 years for anything to happen.
It's a little delayed justice here, Andy.
We're talking about conflicts of interest. We're talking about a carousel of judges. We're talking about, like you said, delayed justice, and might as well throw right in the middle there, alleged family ties to the prior administration. So
Sheriff Wright.
Sheriff Wright. There are a lot of things in this situation that make you go, huh.
Andy, I'm shocked to hear this coming out of Spartanburg County.
I'm shocked that there is little to no outrage.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how long we have now been hyper-focused in kicking out some indications of serious problems in Spartanburg County. And that actually is now going to springboard into the singular photo that I printed off for this segment. You know, folks who know me know that I love just burning our printing machine here. But
we actually ran out of toner thanks to Andy.
Yeah, on the year in review, no less. But no, I printed off just a singular photo, which just speaks to everyone that are saying nothing, somehow saying nothing, and that would be these guys right here. So I'm going to refer to a series of photos, and we can just refer to this one because this is them. You know, I like to ask, especially in this case, where a man is on probation after admittedly, the offense was pled down thanks to a former captain at the sheriff's office who is now a criminal defense attorney, conveniently representing Chuck Wright in one of his many legal matters, representing this former Marine, Eric Powers, and getting that criminal child sex charge pled down to a misdemeanor assault. Nonetheless, Eric Powers was sentenced to, I think, 18 months home detention and 5 years probation. He gets popped again for allegations lodged by these same children in the home, this time his biological daughter. He gets denied bond in November of last year, and then he gets granted bond this month.
And a low bond based on all these charges. I mean,
$50,000 across all 12 counts, which in this state, you have to post
$5,000 for that.
$5,000 essentially, and you're free to go home.
And the solicitor's office, if I'm not mistaken, sought for bond to be denied. They told the judge, we don't think there should be a bond.
That I would argue, yeah, that would be the job of a solicitor's office, is to argue and push for no bond, which was something that he did not have when he went into that hearing. Bond had already been denied. But let's talk about the solicitor's office for a moment, because as I have now repeatedly emphasized, this is the second criminal case involving a child against this former Marine. In both of those cases, all right, which deputies of the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office filed those charges, the case was kicked on up to the Office of Attorney General Alan Wilson. And in both cases, Alan Wilson conflicted the case out. What is the conflict of interest here? I posed that question to the Attorney General's office. They said they can't divulge the conflict, but that they could not ethically prosecute Mr. Powers.
But wouldn't say why.
Couldn't say why.
So that's basically a trust us.
Trust us, we had to conflict the case out and make it even more complicating by now involving a totally separate judicial circuit, because it's already not complicating enough.
So where did they send it?
They sent it, like, as you just noted, to the 13th Circuit. So essentially Greenville, Greenville and Pickens, I believe.
Yeah, the neighboring
so
circuit.
Now we've got prosecutors commuting from Greenville to Spartanburg because they're trying the case in Spartanburg. It's in a Spartanburg courthouse. The offenses allegedly occurred in Spartanburg.
Go figure.
But as I noted in the article, and something that just, again, needs to be repeatedly emphasized, as you noted, there was a delay in justice here. During that delay, members of Powers' family were calling former Sheriff Chuck Wright on Facebook a best friend, referring to him for years as Uncle. In fact, in our article, we have Uncle Chuck. We have a photo of Eric Powers' mother hugged up alongside and cheesing with Chuck Wright at a Powers family function. Why is Chuck Wright there? So I'm not accusing Chuck, the man who has already pled guilty to popping opioids and stealing from the county. I'm not accusing him of inserting himself in here, but this is an oddly disturbing fact pattern that Powers is investigated for some 5, and I'm putting air quotes around investigation, by the way, investigated for some 5 years, and it's not until Chuck Wright resigns from office amid a federal investigation that this man is popped.
Coincidence?
It's something that deserves to be asked, don't you think?
Well, I think you've been kicking over and there's roaches scurrying ever since this Chuck Wright thing. Yeah.
And they're all doing this. You know, I can't help but wonder, where are the legislators? You know?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the danger here, Andy, because this guy, he's getting bond. They claim he's going to be ankle monitored, but they said he could go to work. And most people think, okay, well, he can go to work. He's going to go sit in an office somewhere.
To his office.
But this dude, he's like in HVAC. So he's like going in people's houses.
He's an HVAC installer, correct.
So him working is directly potentially endangering more people.
Some might argue. I mean, is it safe to call this man a repeat offender at this point? I mean, I guess since the latest charges are just allegations, you know, and you're innocent until proven guilty.
He is.
However, let's again just look at the fact pattern. And if you are not outraged, what will piss you off?
Well, do you think the bond is part and parcel with this lengthy delay with all? I mean, do you think that this is part of the rigged system in Spartanburg?
Spartanburg is a rigged system? This is the first time I'm hearing of this.
We're shocked to find that gambling has been going on in that establishment.
And we're shocked to see evidence that is indicative of law enforcement officers, attorneys, and former representatives lining their pockets with those illegal dollars. I've been posting all about it on social media. But again,
yeah, that wasn't a movie reference, folks. There's actual gambling going on in that establishment.
But these are the legislators. These are the representatives of Spartanburg. I mean, what is Josh Kimbrell doing? He just keeps going to Facebook, talking about the governor's mansion that he'll never see.
Well, he's been busy dealing with allegations of corruption against him. You know, they accused him of stealing $2 million.
Only the best in Spartanburg, or in politics for that matter. You know, where is Scott? Scott Talley. You know, he no longer is in
Former
the Senate.
senator.
Yeah, he didn't run for no reason worth asking at all. Where's Henry McMaster when Chuck Wright is allegedly popping pills and playing Candy Crush?
He's defending him,
and then later saying, "I was so saddened by the whole case." Why aren't you pissed? Why isn't anybody else pissed? I mean, if this is not proof positive that there's probably a problem in Spartanburg, I don't know what is.
Well, here's the other thing. Why aren't they pissed? Because kids are being victimized here, again, allegedly, under these dozen counts of graphic things that we're not even talking about. And I want to point that out. Folks, we cover so many of these cases. We don't want to cover these things. We don't want to come to you every week and have to discuss, or in the case of this week's show, not discuss some of these graphic details. It's not something we want to do, but Andy, like you say, if you're not doing it, who the hell is?
And talking on previous cases, because, you know, I enjoy reporting on public corruption. I do. And you know, pill popping sheriffs and coke sniffing cops, it's fun, all right? And you know, you could look at these crimes and go, okay, I can understand that. I can understand why you would want to, for some reason, ship cocaine to the low country. I'm referring to another cop, of course. I can understand why you would want to steal you know, public dollars from your sheriff's office coffers, why you would want to pop Oxycontin, about 140 within 3 months' time. You can't understand. You can't justify what these men are doing or allegedly doing. Prior to this show, I did a cursory search, just a cursory search of some of the cases that I've covered just recently. And as you noted in the lead, former legislator R.J. May, former magistrate Skip Gosnell, former Lexington firefighter John Contrell, former Irmo Mayor Pro Tem Eric Sickinger, former Rock Hill police officer Daniel Shealy. These are just a few cases over the past couple of months involving men who have either pled guilty or are being accused of the worst possible crimes alive. And what does our state do? Nothing. No reaction, no outrage. I say here, see, nothing.
Well, you know, Andy, I guess we have to give a shout out to Fox Carolina. They finally picked this story up this week.
After he was charged, and I was posting about the charges
for over a week.
In November of 2025, I shared a post on the charges. All right. And then, of course, once he appeared for his bond hearing, I posted a story on how Judge Hayes, who we can credit for this man now being released on bond, taking the case under advisement. And then we posted our magnum opus on all of the many interesting ties in this man's vortex. And only then, after all that, did Fox Carolina say that Marine has been charged. Okay, that's old news.
And I'm sure that they were indignant as to the bond and how this guy was let out on bond. I'm sure that they, you know, were driving that narrative.
You know, had they given a damn, then maybe this narrative would look different.
Yeah. So this applies not only to the politicians and the law enforcement and the prosecutors, it's the media. The upstate media.
The media, yeah. I mean, they are the narrative drivers. As somebody who used to work in media myself, the fourth pillar was never meant to be something that regurgitated press releases.
I'm going to tell you what Elon Musk says to a lot of people. You are the media, man. You are the media.
That could be taken as an insult.
Well, based on the way they're handling this, but folks, I'm going to tell you something. This is the level of accountability that we bring to bear, not just on political institutions, not just on court institutions, not just on law enforcement institutions, not just on cults of personality like the one that surrounded Chuck Wright in Spartanburg County for decades. Just because you bring some of those institutions down doesn't mean the rot still doesn't need to be exposed for what it is. Andy, nobody in South Carolina is doing a better job exposing it than you.
Give some credit to Jody Barr now. He's a badass.
He's popping out of bushes everywhere. Okay.
Every
credit.
once in a while. But no, it takes a village to expose this level of what appears to be corruption. And I will always give credit to the folks who reach out to me, who entrust in me with their law enforcement certifications or their standing in the community to just listen. And that's all I'm asking our media to do, is just listen. But it appears as though we stopped giving a damn a long time ago. So if you want somebody to listen, because I can't promise anything beyond that, hit me up, Andy@FITSNews.com.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for this week's edition. I want to thank everybody once again for taking the time to tune in. By the way, if you're already a FITSNews.com subscriber, I want to thank you. Those subscriptions empower everything we do here. These lights, the cameras, the mics, the accountability, all of it is thanks to your support. If you're not a FITSNews subscriber, please help us out by subscribing today. Or if you are, you can gift a subscription or check out our merch store for some cool stuff there. Quick programming note. This coming Wednesday, 7 p.m., Joe White, one of the leaders of South Carolina's Freedom Caucus, one of the main voices for reform in the South Carolina General Assembly, will be here in studio for another edition of Fitz Politic, our live weekly political show. Again, that's at 7 p.m. Wednesday night, right here on FITSNews.com. We'll catch you next time on The Week in Review.